Property investing versus crypto investing. Now, property is one of the first types of investment most people do. I have done both. I've been doing property developing for the last 10 years, and I've also been in crypto for the last 6 years. My main focus now is educating complete beginners on how cryptocurrency works. But because I've done both, I'm going to go over the right ways, the wrong ways, the pros and the cons, and the outcomes of investing in property and investing in crypto. None of this is financial advice. This is just information that I've learned on my investing journey with my investment portfolios. So today we're going to learn how it works. Let's go. Welcome to Let's Learn Crypto 101. And today we are going to look at the reality of property, what it actually costs and the processes around investing in property. Because 9 times out of 10, when someone first starts out on their investment journey, that is the thing that they go for because it is the safest or seen as the safest thing you can start buying. And everybody will tell you, as soon as you can, buy a property, get on the property ladder. But is it really the right thing for you? So Let's Learn Crypto 101, we show you how money is changing so you don't get left behind. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and let's get on with the content. Okay, so I'm going to go through a few ways that I would find a property. Now, the example I'm going to use here is an area that I have no local knowledge of. It's just a quick example of what I would normally do. But first things first, you need to work out what your budget is. We're going to look later on in the video at the different finance options that you can use, but right now, we're going to use the figure of 250,000. So say you were able to buy a property of 250,000 and you were going to renovate that and then sell it. So what I've worked with is a deposit of 50,000 to put down on a property, 50,000 for the renovation costs, and then you will have a little extra for other costs. So I've allowed for 15,000 just in case. Now, I totally understand that if you're new to investing or you're hearing me using figures like 115,000 as the starting point, I get it. But this is one of the big problems with property investing is a huge barrier of entry to get into it in the first place, okay? And this is one of the cons to property. You really do need a chunk of money to be able to really get going, and you'll see exactly what I mean later on in the video. But for now, if we just look at one of the strategies I would use to find a property that I was going to buy. Okay, so if we were to go on to this website, now this is in the UK, this website is called Rightmove, and you can find properties on here that you may want to buy to renovate to then flip on. And there's little things that you want to look out for. So this property I found in an area called Bristol in the UK. We're going to flick through the pictures here and we're going to have a look what stands out. And as you're flicking through, you can see the kitchen is tired, the bathroom is all messed up, and you know that this is a brilliant sign. It's an amazing sign that this thing needs renovating. And then you look in the corner and you see an old fireplace. There's the wooden paneling on the walls. I mean, no carpets. That's a great sign. But you know that this property needs a lot of renovating. So then I would scroll down. I found the property that I think I like. You scroll all the way down and there is a section that says recently sold and under offer. So you click on that and then you'll find an area. Well, this is showing you properties that have sold in a recent area, and you scroll down, and I'm going to look for a property that's got the higher valuation to try and work out what I can achieve, what could be the maximum value I could achieve from the property, and then I'm going to compare them. So here we go. I found a property for 340,000 that sold recently. It's nearby, and I'm going to bring up the information for that, and then I'm going to scroll down, and okay, we've got the pictures here. So if I flick through these pictures, I can see it's very nicely maintained. It's well presented. They've obviously put a lot of effort into this property. And this is something that I'm thinking, okay, can I bring the property that I'm looking at up to this standard? Well, there's a big potential. There is a lot of potential there to do that. You used to be able to knock the value of a property down quite substantially. So you could play the game of putting in offers, bringing the prices, down maybe 20, 30,000. It used to be possible, but now it's a lot more difficult. So we're going to stick with the 250,000 price that it's asking for as the price we're probably going to end up buying it for. Right, so now we've found a property that we're going to go for. We're going to get in touch with the estate agent. We're going to start a negotiation process. You want to have a solicitor in place as well. You're also going to have to look at the different finance options, which we'll look at in the next slides. It gets a little bit complicated because there are a lot of different fees hidden away, like, for example, stamp duty and the taxes at the end of this. Now, also, I am focusing on buying this property in your own name as a second property. It is not actually the best option to do it. One of the better ways to do this is to buy it in a company name. But because this is a comparison to cryptocurrency, when you're buying cryptocurrency, you're buying it in your own personal name. So you'll be able to see a direct comparison between the two. So we now know that 250,000 we're going to buy it for. We're going to spend 50,000 renovating it with other fees included. Hopefully, we're going to achieve 350,000 as the sale price, because we found one for 340 that sold for 340. By the time, you've got to take into consideration property prices are going up. So if this whole process now, from the moment I buy to the point I sell, takes roughly 8 months, I don't care who you are, it takes roughly 8 months now with the buying process, the renovation process, the selling process, because that can take ages. You'll have people, they'll offer on a property, they'll take you a month into it, then they'll pull out last minute. You get all this nonsense. So anticipate for 8 months. If you can get it done in 8 months, amazing. There's something else here on the Rightmove slide that I didn't highlight earlier, which where you can see here it says no onward chain. The point of this is it says somebody has maybe died. Now it sounds a little bit morbid, but this is exactly the sort of thing you're looking for. Why? Because there is no chain to buying a property, meaning you can speed the thing up. You're dealing with the family a lot of the time. You've got no one else is trying to buy their property before they can move out. So you want to look for things like no onward chain. So we are hoping to make a 50,000 profit before taxes and other fees out of the other side doing this renovation. But how are you going to fund the rest of it? You're putting your 50,000 deposit down. You need to get other finance. Now, this is where it gets a little bit more complicated, because if you were going to do buy to let, you can get a buy to let mortgage. But there are strict rules on how long it takes you or how long you own that property for before you sell it. Because if you sell it within 8 months to a year, the mortgage company is going to be, hey, I know what you've just done. You've just done a flip. And that's what this method of making money is. You're buying, renovating, and selling, also known as flipping. If the bank highlights you as someone who's done that, they'll blacklist you, and then you won't be able to get buy-to-let mortgages again in the future. So you have to use something called bridging finance or a bridging loan. And it does come with quite a high interest. So ways that you can do this are, you would put your deposit down, you would get the bridging loan in place, it will charge you a monthly interest, and some of them will allow you to pay all that interest back plus the lump sum at the end when you sell the property. Here is a chart showing you the costs of these sort of loans. So if you can see, the average monthly interest here will be £1,595, and this is at a monthly interest of 0.75%. There's also little fees that a lot of people will miss. There's a lender facility fee, which is at 2%. So that's £4,000 you're paying for the privilege of arranging this sort of finance to start with. So then when I'm talking about the length of time it takes you to renovate this property, and I'm saying 8 months, you get a lot of pressure put on you when you're using bridging finance, because every single month, if it's costing you $1,500-1,600 a month, you're in panic mode. You want to get this property sold as quick as you possibly can. So yes, you could take this loan out over a 12-month term, but you do not want to have it hanging around for that 12 months. This is where it can get a little bit complicated when you're trying to sell it, because if you get people wasting your time, it just costs you so much money. So how long does this actually take? I always say it takes roughly 12 months to get one property bought, renovated, and sold. Why is that? Because it can take a few months to find a property, to do the negotiation process, and then actually have the sale go through. The moment the sale goes through and you get the bridging loan come through, that is when you need to get onto it as quick as possible, because this is costing you money every single day. So you need to have your team in place. You need to have your electricians, your plumbers, your kitchen fitters, your tilers. You need to have all of this sort of stuff picked out already and you've got prices put together. If you're going to do this long term, you want to get a team of regulars that know how you like to operate. Now, I anticipate 4 months for a renovation, but that is pushing it, and that is if you really do know what you're doing, because there are always delays. For example, you need the electrician and the plumber to go into the property before you have it plastered, because they need to rewire, replumb before all the plastering goes on. You need to get the kitchen fitter to come in after the plumbers and after the plasterers. There's a process to this. Then you're probably going to want to go in and do the painting, because that also costs a lot of money if you pay someone to come in and do the painting, right? So there's a whole process here. But as every day is ticking by, this is costing you a lot of money. So you want to be ready to go. Then when you come to the selling process, you want to have all your certification in order from the plumbers, the electricians, anyone else, any building regs, if you built an extension or anything like that. You want to have it all in place, ready to go, because when you're going through the selling process, they're going to ask you for this. The buyer solicitor is going to ask you to prove that you've had all this work done, because they want to justify the increase in value if you're now selling it for $350,000 after buying it for $250,000. This is a pro tip, and you need to anticipate this. When you go to estate agents, I've always found the best ones to use are the local estate agents. When you get into this, you'll know what I mean. You have the large chains that are nationwide. You don't want to use them. You want to use the estate agents that have grown in that area and they have the best local knowledge, because they're likely to give you the best valuation of your property that's a more realistic valuation. Because I promise you, you'll come across this ridiculous situation. If you get 3 estate agents out, they'll all come out and give you different prices. They're all wanting to get your property on their books. So they'll try and give you the highest valuation that they can, and you're going to go with the one. They notice you're going to go with the one that gives you the highest valuation, and you get fixated on that price. You'll put it on the market. What tends to happen is there might be nobody who's interested. So then you'll be encouraged to lower the price to the valuation that the other ones came up with in the first place. That's one way that things slow down. Remember, this is all under time pressure. The other problem is, if you get the valuation that you want and a buyer comes along and they say, yeah, I'm willing to buy it for that price, they're going to have to get a mortgage in place, and the bank will send a surveyor out. Remember, the surveyor works for the bank. They'll use local knowledge of the area to decide, is this property worth the money? And I can't tell you how many times this has happened to me, but the surveyor will downvalue the property. So say you were trying to sell it for $350,000, the surveyor said, we only think it's worth $330,000. That can cause a problem, because for you, you're wanting to sell it for the higher valuation, but now the buyer is thinking, is it even really worth that much? These are all the little friction points that slow things down, all the while you're paying a bridging finance fee. So you can see where the stress starts to build up when you're using finance to do this property renovation path. Now, here is a big one that a lot of people just miss out on, and I have been guilty of this in the past as well. Stamp duty. Now, this is what really makes you hate the UK tax system, because as you can see from this chart here, this is from the gov.uk website. Up to the value of $125,000 for a second home. This is a second home, so you'll be paying a higher rate stamp duty. It is 5% up to $125,000. Then anything after $125,000 up to $250,000 is 7%. What does this work out as? For buying a property at $250,000, you are going to be spending $15,000 on stamp duty, and there is no way to avoid it. So when I said earlier about the amount of money that you're going to put aside to renovate the property being $50,000 for the deposit, $50,000 for the renovation and the fees, the extra $15,000 on top is for the stamp duty. So let's look at the figures here. To be buying a property for $250,000 with a $50,000 renovation cost, the loan cost, if you can get this done in 8 months, renovated and sold, and the money paid back to the bridging loan company, you're going to pay £16,566, which is a huge chunk of money. Then you're going to have to account for other fees, like solicitor fees. There's all sorts of surveyor fees. They add up. So I've added £5,000 of miscellaneous just to account for your renovation cost, £28,434. This is tight. This is very, very tight. So you're going to have to be very careful with what you buy and what you do with the property. Your profit then would be 50,000 if you're selling it for 350,000. And here's where you get absolutely nailed. So if you're already the higher rate taxpayer and you're on 40%, you've just done all that work, you've flipped the property, you make a 50,000 profit. Well, now you can deduct 40% of the value of that. So that's 20,000 gone to the tax man. So now you have 30,000 in profit. The reason for this is because it is a flipped property, it is not taxed at capital gains, it is taxed as trading income, which goes under income tax, which puts you under the 40%, which is why if you're doing it as an individual, it is not the best way to do this. The best way to do this is in a company because you'll be taxed on your corporation tax, which is 20%. Okay, so it's just one thing to keep in mind. But as I've said earlier, this is a direct comparison to investing in cryptocurrency. So if we look at this, you've now got £30,000 as your total profit. But obviously, you've just spent 15,000 on stamp duty. So take that away. So now you end up with 15,000. That is your profit because that stamp duty is just gone. 15,000 is your profit, which is a 13% gain on £115,000 initial investment into this project, which 13%, it is good. You are beating inflation and you are able to grow your wealth by doing this. If you keep doing this one a year for the next 4 years, you would have built up a profit of £60,000. Not entirely true because every time you flip a property, you can put a bit more of that money into the next property, so you can maybe reduce the amount of interest that you're paying. But if we just use 60,000 as if you weren't going to keep rolling it through and you were going to take some of that money for yourself for lifestyle, 60,000 is the profit. Now then, let's compare this to crypto investing. Okay, cryptocurrency. Now, where to start here? The only big thing to consider here is education. It's such a new asset class and hardly anyone really understands how it works. And it's one of those things where you can make a lot of money, but you can lose it all as well, just making so many silly mistakes like getting your wallet hacked, leaving your crypto on an exchange that goes bankrupt. You would lose it all. So there are other risks here. With property, you're not likely to lose it all. You know, if the market slowed down, you could at least rent it out. But in crypto, if something catastrophic happens, you really can lose it. But this is why I will focus on Bitcoin only whilst we're going into the crypto section, because it is the largest crypto and it is the safest one. And if you're a complete beginner, that's the one that you want to focus on. But as you go down the crypto rabbit hole, you will move into the other crypto and you will learn what they're doing. It's a wild market to get into, but fixate on Bitcoin here now. Education is the main barrier of entry for people being successful in crypto, which is why I do a live 2-day course for complete beginners. I've got to get it in there, but I've been teaching people crypto for a number of years now, and this is a fast track because I get it. As newcomers to crypto, there's a lot of information that just it's very hard to understand. You want to try and learn this stuff, you go on YouTube and you've got YouTubers that are years into the crypto space. So when you're trying to understand what people are talking about, it sounds like absolute nonsense. This is why I put this course together. It's going to fast track you so you understand what's going on. The key here is to be successful in crypto, you need to understand what it is, what's going on, and how to use it. Every asset class has market cycles. The property market cycle is around 9 years for it to go up, hit a peak, and come back down, and then it starts to rise up again. But it's slow. It's not like one day it all just crashes. I mean, 2008 was very different, but it's not as volatile at all. And that is one of the cons of crypto, the volatility, but it's also one of the pros. It's just how you handle it. So if we look at the figures here, when I've been talking about the cycles, I'm meaning there are very explosive points in a crypto cycle, and then there are extreme downturns. So what I've picked here is the date, the 24th of May, 2021. The market did go from there and do an absolutely explosive rise, and then it crashed down 80% on the other side. So I have accounted for that. I've gone from 4 years, from May the 24th, 2021 to May the 24th, 2025. So if you put £115,000 into cryptocurrency on May the 4th, 2021, the value of your crypto would be £337,000 by the same period in 2025. I haven't even accounted for the potential explosive rise that's about to happen towards the end of this year. The gains in crypto far outweigh any other asset class on the planet. And the other thing here is we've gone into the property portfolio and the process to actually buying a property, securing the finance, managing tradesmen, spending a lot of time there yourself, the panic, the worry. In crypto, you don't have to manage it. Once you've bought it, you don't have to manage anyone else. You just have to manage the risk, which is not getting it hacked, lost, stolen. But it's also managing the volatility, because it is so explosive. You could put that 115,000 in, and then it corrects 30% over a couple of days, and you're like, what have I just done? Have I just lost all my money? But if you understand how these market cycles work and what crypto is here for, you know that it is just naturally very volatile. So you get to a point where you accept the volatility to the downside because you're in it for the volatility to the upside. You wouldn't get the upside volatility if there was no downside volatility. We're going to now look at a big list of pros and cons of property versus crypto. Now, yes, the profit looks absolutely huge in crypto, so it's only fair that we look at the taxation that's going to happen out of the other side. So looking at these figures here, your initial investment is £115,000. Your profit is £222,000. You're taxed at the higher rate capital gains tax, which is 20%. The total to be taxed, you have a £3,000 a year capital gains allowance. So take £3,000 off that as tax-free. The total to be taxed at 20% is £219,000. So the capital gains tax you would pay on this figure is £43,800, leaving you with a take-home profit of £175,200. Adding that together with your initial investment, you now have £293,200. Wildly different to the property investing side of things. So if your long-term goal is to build generational wealth, you can see that actually investing in cryptocurrency does look like the better option, because then what you can do is you can take a lot of the profits from your crypto investments and start rolling it into property development projects to keep growing the amount of money. Because if you can get 2 properties on the go at the same time, that's when it starts to really make an impact. So initially, crypto sounds very risky with the big rises and the big falls, but over a 4-year period, a longer term time horizon, you can see that it outperforms in the most incredible fashion. But the risk is investing at the wrong time. So as the crypto market starts to pick up and starts to go absolutely nuts, it encourages you to want to put your money in. And if you don't know where we are in the market cycle, you might invest at the top and then spend 3 years trapped in the market as the market comes down and then comes back up the other side. That is a big part of the risk, but that all comes down to education. Now, as you can see, the price difference is drastic, but we're still going to go through a list of pros and cons to understand what the reality is of this, because quite honestly, to make a good profit in crypto, it's hard. It's not easy at all. There's so many risks out there to losing it all. You also become a slave to your emotions because you think it's going to go up forever, and then you don't sell, and then it comes back down the other side. You've made no money. Whereas if you went into property, you know when you've sold it, you've got money. So let's look at a list of the pros and cons here. Okay, the pros and cons. Number 1, physical asset, usable and rentable. That is one of the best things about property. You have it. And if you weren't able to sell it, you can always rent it out and generate an income. The other problem is you do have a lot of maintenance. So if you are renting a property out, or you are buying it to renovate it and sell it, you may come across points where the roof is damaged, the boiler goes, there's a mistake, a tradesman damages something on the property, and this costs you extra money. But with crypto, it is easily transferable. So it's not a physical asset that's stuck in one place, so you can pay for things quite quickly, but there is no physical backing, so it is quite easy to lose it, particularly in hacks. Stability. With property, it is stable and low volatility. Crypto market is extremely volatile, high upsides, high downsides. But with property, you've got a rough idea of where you are. There's not going to be you wake up one morning and you've just lost 50 grand on your property, but that can happen in crypto. The big problem with property is it is very illiquid, and if you needed to get the money out of a property, you've got to go through the whole selling process and the legal process, which can take time. So it's not easy to get the money out. But with crypto, it's very easy to transfer it anywhere you want. And if you needed cash immediately, you can just sell it straight away and have it sent to your bank account. Income generation, regular rental income possibilities with property. The only problem is it comes with its own risks, and obviously there's other taxes there, but say you've spent money renovating a house and you get a tenant that comes in and they just destroy the place, you've lost value on the property. Also, you may have people that aren't going to pay the rent. There's also an issue where if a tenant is coming to the end of their agreement and you can't find somebody else to replace the tenant, you might have a few months of no income, but you're still paying a mortgage. With crypto, there is something called staking. I haven't gone into it. This is something I go into on my course, but you can stake your crypto on the network and earn 3, 4, 5% income, but you're getting paid in an asset that's also volatile, which is good for your long term because you're not getting paid in the pound. The pound is something that loses value over time, but you're getting paid in crypto, which goes up over time. So regulations with property is well established. You know what the score is. There's no legal grey areas, but the tax system is just set up to completely nail you to the wall. So there is that. With crypto, the regulations are always changing and governments don't really have a solid framework in place. So that can be a difficult one because they could just turn around and raise taxes suddenly, and then it becomes not a very beneficial asset to invest in. But you certainly don't get the same protections in crypto as you would do in property, but hopefully that's starting to change. The entry cost is a massive one. This is the biggest one with property. You need a huge chunk of money to get into it in the first place, and it takes a long time to even build up that amount of money. With crypto, it doesn't cost you a huge amount of money. You could put £100 in. You could put a smaller amount in if you wanted to, but that starts you on your invested journey. The other thing with property is, yes, you can take out a loan against your property, but you can also do that with crypto. The only difference is with a property, it's not as volatile, but with crypto, you can take a loan out against your crypto, but if the price drops really quickly, you'll get liquidated and lose your crypto. On the next section, liquidity. So with property, the point of it taking ages to buy and sell means that it's not as volatile. If there is a market crash happening, you're not likely to get absolutely nailed in the crash. But when it comes to crypto, because it trades 24/7, something like a war could kick off around the world, which we have seen, and the market will absolutely murder itself. And that can be quite scary to sit through, but you're not going to get that in property. With leverage, having a property gives you a strong financial backing to be able to take money out of a property. You could take a loan out against your property quite easily to help you out, and you still have the asset. There is obviously the risk that the market drops, but it's nothing like it is in crypto. But in crypto, if you take out a leverage position and the market drops, so if you borrow money against your crypto and the market drops really quickly, it will liquidate you and you will have lost your crypto. You would have lost your money, and that is very common in crypto. So you've got to be very careful when it comes to managing your risk and leverage. Inflation hedge. Now, property does rise with inflation, but the risks you have are in interest rates. So if somebody is going to raise the interest rate, we've seen a lot of interest rate volatility recently. If you've got an interest-only mortgage you're paying, or your interest rate is up for renewal, you could find that you're now paying a lot more than you were before, and you can be trapped in that situation. In that particular situation, if you're forced to sell, you can guarantee that the market is also weaker, so you can lose quite a lot of money in that situation because other people are trying to sell. The big pro of Bitcoin is it was designed to be an inflation hedge, so over the long term, it reacts quite highly to the loss of value of currency and inflation. So Bitcoin has the best upside potential versus inflation out of any other asset. But people will say it's unproven over the long term because it's only been around for around 15 years. Transparency. Legal ownership with a property is easy. You know exactly who owns it. But you will have hidden costs like taxes and repairs on the property. Whereas with crypto, you don't have any extra costs. And it's on a public chain, blockchain, so it is easy to identify that you own it. But as society is growing, it's starting to understand this better. But when it comes to hacks, it is a lot more difficult to recover your funds and almost impossible in some cases. Taxation. Property tax has been around for a long time, so realistically you can find a definitive answer on what taxes you need to pay. But with crypto, who knows? To be honest, they're changing all the time and we don't know what regulations are going to be around the corner. There's a lot of positive stuff coming out of America. To be honest, the UK is not so positive, so we'll see if that changes in the future. But owning property is a certainty. Owning crypto is very uncertain with how much tax you might have to pay. But that's why the volatility is there, because it's seen as very risky. So there we go. I hope that helps. I hope that explains what the path of property developing is really like, the risks you need to take into account, how long it can actually take, and really how much profit you can make out of the other side. It is one of the most popular forms of investing out there, but it's not always the best. It just depends what your life goals are. Now, crypto investing comes with a lot of its own risk, but it does come down to education. A big part of this is your risk tolerance. If you feel like the volatility of crypto is too much and it's just going to fry your brain, then maybe stick to property or diversify. Do a bit of property, do a bit of crypto, put a little bit into crypto. It's an interesting world to get into. But I'll leave you with this statement. Your time has been monetized. It's time to control that currency. See you soon.